this traffic is making me sick. Boy, I can't wait to have you near. I gotta hurry, hurry, hurry now. Quick, 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 just step on the gas, 'cause I don't wanna miss this. This opportunity will only come once in my life, my life. I gotta hurry, hurry, hurry now. Quick, 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 just step on the gas, 'cause I don't wanna miss this. See what you're bringing me, boy, it's priceless. I gotta be out of my mind not to try this. Through strength I found love. In time I found myself in happiness. Through strength I found love. In time I found myself in Boy, I need to say what's in my heart. I was scared, but I'll do my part. I came back to tell you face to face, so what we have won't go to waste. Gotta hurry, hurry, hurry now. Quick, 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 just step on the gas, 'cause I don't wanna miss this. This opportunity will only come once in my life, my life, yeah. Sorry, 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 I'm coming down to fix this. You should know how I feel, I know I got you twisted. See what you're bringing me, boy, it's priceless. I gotta be out of my mind not to try this. Through strength I found love. In time I found myself in happiness with you. Through strength I found love. In time I found myself in happiness with you.
Poor old Faye White. Every single montage she makes it onto after that penalty miss. Bless her. Welcome back, officially, formally, to those of you who joined us earlier on for our women's football panel discussion, which continued over lunch for many of us. And welcome for the first time to some of you who've joined us only just now. People also, not just in the room, but also joining us online on FIFA.com and on FIFA's YouTube website for this inaugural women's football and women in leadership debate to coincide with the weekend of International Women's Day. Now, we've seen her skills just then on the video. Hope Powell. Now she's going to, I don't think you brought a football with you. I think there's a few in the building if you want to, no more juggling? No? Okay. Hope Powell's going to come up and deliver the first keynote speech of the afternoon. She was, of course, England national women's head coach for 15 years. The first female to achieve the UEFA Pro licence. She oversaw England's setups from under-15s to under-23s level, as well as the senior women's side, of course. And she set up a coach mentoring scheme as well. She was awarded an OBE as well as a CBE for her services to the women's game. Hope Powell.
Okay, I won't. You can, this microphone. No, it's okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Firstly, I'd just like to thank FIFA for inviting me here today to be a keynote speaker. I've been asked to talk about really my challenges in the game, as a player, as a coach, and some of the hurdles and obstacles I encountered, and obviously what I'd done during my time with the FA. So really this is just to talk about my journey, and it comes in sort of four phases, if you like. It was player, it was coach, it was manager of England, and now with my work with both UEFA and FIFA, working with coaches as a coach consultant and working with the future generations of coaches, as well as working on the game and doing technical observation. So I'm going to try and put this into perspective in 15 minutes. Feels like a lifetime, but I've got, I think, 38 years to condense, which I will try to do. I've been involved in football, actually, as I said, I think 38 years, when I actually started playing at the age of 11. And it's really interesting because from day one, I encountered challenges wanting to play football. My culture is Jamaican, West Indian, parents, Jamaican, West Indian, and this young black girl wants to play football on the streets of London. Now, in my culture, that is not normal for a girl of 11 to want to play football. So I had a real challenge with my family. My mother brought me up at the time, obviously, convincing her that football was a good thing for me to do. She couldn't understand it. No female she ever knew, certainly growing up in Jamaica as she did, ever played football. The woman's role was in the kitchen, at home, doing all of those things that I don't mind doing, but I don't want to necessarily do. So my biggest challenge from a very, very early age was to convince my mum that this was a really good thing for me to do. She was very pro-education. It's more about education. It's more about It's more about getting a husband. It's more about all of those things, which I am if anybody knows me, I'm the complete opposite. So basically what I had to do, I actually snuck out. When she said I couldn't go, I actually went anyway. And I think the realization for her was that football, number one, grounded me as a person. It made me focus on something that I felt was important, and it made me a strong character. And more importantly, it kept me off the streets and out of trouble. So, number one, my family was my biggest challenge, very early on in life at the age of 11. And I think, I expelled the myth that women couldn't play football. Now my mum is my number one fan. I think especially when I lost my job at the FA, I mean, she wanted to go to the FA, let me tell you. And I had to subsequently just really calm her down. It's okay, we move on. So as a player from a very young age, starting in the game was a challenge. And then I think growing up on the streets in South East London, I was the only girl that actually played football on my estate. And then, I had challenges from boys. I think Moya alluded to her daughters going and they don't recognise her as a footballer and, wearing the kit. I had to convince boys, men on my estate growing up that actually girls can and do play. And the way I did that was through my ability to play. I wasn't a bad player. In actual fact, I was probably the best on the estate. So I actually won a lot of people round in that way. But it was for a very, very early age for me, it was very, very challenging. I had to convince people that it was okay and right and proper for me to play. And I think some people, Jacqui alluded to it, Moya alluded to it, we didn't play at school. Well, actually, I did play at school. I insisted that I played at school, and I actually got into the team at school and then was banned by the FA for playing. So I know it hasn't been an easy journey for women to play. Young girls, it's a lot easier nowadays for young girls to be involved in the game, which is great. Those are the massive strides we have made. But for me as a young kid, I made sure I played. So one of the challenges was making sure I played and making sure I played for the school team. I then at a very early age decided that I wanted to be employed in the game. I think it was the 78 World Cup. Someone might correct him here, 78 or 76, can't remember, where I was watching the World Cup. And I decided I wanted to be a professional footballer. And obviously, this was never going to happen because I was a female. So I decided to go very early on a coaching pathway because I wanted it was nothing about giving something back to the game. I wanted to be paid and employed in football. So I took my first coaching qualification at the age of 18. Back then it was the prelim. And interestingly enough, it was quite challenging. I was the only female on the course. It was a course that was led by a man. It was 28, 29 other males, and there's little old me, black girl from South East London, wanting to become a coach. They couldn't get their head round it. And trying to talk about football to guys at that time, and even today, was really challenging. And again, the only way I could convince them that I was good enough to be part of this course was through my playing ability. And that saved me. And then obviously I could play the game. So once they could see I could play the game, they actually then wanted to start speaking to me about football. And subsequently I did really well. I got really good marks in my then prelim. But again, it was a challenge. I was the only female. I felt I had to be better than everybody else on the course, simply just to prove that actually my gender has nothing to do with it, when actually it has everything to do with it. So I had to be better than everybody else. And as I said, I did really, really well. And obviously I went on to my A licence. You can imagine the story was exactly the same. One of two females, I think at the time. The other woman was Julie Chipchase, who still works for the FA now. You know, and you go on these courses, and I remember I turned up, and if any of you have done your A licence, you have to be part of practical sessions. So they ask for volunteers. You know, who wants to volunteer? We're going to do a 5v5 session. I get up, I'm overlooked, I sit down. And this happened about 10 times. I get up, volunteer, I'm overlooked, and I sit down. And in the end, as the days went on, the guys, and this is no disrespect to men in the room, none. You know, I was an international player. The guys started to get tired. They didn't stand up anymore. I stood up, I played, and my playing ability got me noticed. And the reason I'm saying this, it's a real shame that women aren't valued because they actually might have knowledge of the game. It was only when I started playing that the guys on the group valued my opinion, they valued my input. Actually, they started to come to me to ask about their sessions. So I actually, in effect, became their tutor on the course, which I found quite, funny, ha-ha. But for me, it's just some of the challenges. The game was never spoken about in terms of women playing football. It was always, and in the men's league, and at Chelsea, and at Arsenal, and, you know, there was no reference to women's football. All the material, and still today, is focused around the men's game. Still today, and we're 2015, and it's all about the men's game. So from a coach educational point of view, this for me is a real challenge, something that we really have to break down. And some of the work that I'm going to be able to do with FIFA, I'm hoping can make some changes in that respect. Obviously, after my A licence, it was then my pro licence. First black female to do the pro licence. Obviously, on courses with ex-professional footballers, not even ex, some playing still, but ex-managers, ex-coaches, some still in the game. And again, I went along, only female, and again, I had to prove that I had a right to be there. I had to prove it, even though, to be honest, I didn't want to go. Howard Wilkinson, who's my mentor then and still my mentor today, he said I had to go. And I'm really pleased I did. But the challenges I had, the guys were great. They accepted me, wanted me to be part of it. But what they never did was want to discuss the game with me. Because football is man talk, which is a load of crap, if I can say that. It's not. Football is everybody's game, and everybody should be able to talk about it in what environment. But in that environment, it was very much man's talk. So again, I had to prove that I was worthy enough to be there. So I volunteered, I led our group, and I'll put this on record, I led our group, I led the coaching, I led in terms of the presentation, because I knew my name alone is not going to get me that qualification. I felt I had to work harder than everybody else simply because I was female. And that for me isn't right. I think my knowledge and expertise years of the game should be enough to say, well, actually, she knows what she's talking about. I'm not saying that everybody knows what they're talking about, but gender plays a big part in it. Fortunately, I got my pro license and did very well. So my experience as a player, getting my coaching qualifications, every route I've had challenges that I've had to overcome, and overcoming them meant I had to be better than everybody else. In 1998, I was appointed the coach of England. And if I'm honest, brutally honest, I was a player yesterday, I was a coach tomorrow, and it was great. It wasn't easy, but I was literally picked from a player into management. No experiences of managing a team, so I really had to think on my feet, and I was very much left alone for years. I got support, not the support that it is now, but it did me a favour. I had a clean sheet of paper, and I basically developed the international framework, the setup, 5 teams responsible for the coaches, mentored the coaches, did everything to get the game off the ground, as well as a lot of other people. But internationally, I was at the forefront of it, and I loved it, and it was great. And it's an interesting thing happened in my tenure. The game suddenly became popular. And you've all been part of this. The growth of the game has been immense. There are more players than ever before. There's more media attention than ever before. And we've spoken, some people have spoken about that today. There's more commercial interest than ever before. So the interest has blossomed. Great. So for me, that should be a great thing. The problem I had while I was leading these 5 teams was that suddenly the popularity of the game and the opportunity for more females to become involved in coaching, earn money, earn a living, I would say, suddenly I feel, and people might want to challenge me on this, that more and more men have found the game interesting and want to be part of it. And I'm talking from a coaching perspective. Decision makers at the FA suddenly want to tell me how I should be developing this game. And that's okay. I welcomed the input. But it was really ironic that it went from very little interest to a lot of interest. And having to manage that, those challenges was difficult because we did well. They probably added to that progress, but it was just really interesting the way that there was suddenly a full turnaround in interest. And really, from a coach's point of view and my point of view, the game has become so interesting now, the kudos, the attention that surrounded it. More and more females are being squeezed out, in my opinion, of the game from a coaching perspective. And this is where my next challenge and the work that I can do with FIFA and UEFA comes. Because I think it's really important that we talk about leaders off the pitch. I'm talking about leaders on the pitch, front of house. Their expertise and their knowledge being at the forefront of the game, which now is in a position where females can make a living. And why not? And some people say, it's about having a role. I understand that we need role models. But now, in the coaching domain, there are opportunities for females to make a living in the game, which is fantastic. My concern is that there are fewer and fewer females coaching at the highest level. I think it was, did someone say 7%? That is devastating to me. Only 7% of females are in the game. And at the highest level, I can tell you of a number of female coaches that have been coaching at the highest level that are now no longer in the game. I'm just going to read them out because I actually have my list with me. So, number 1, Hope Powell. In a position for 15 years, I think she did a great job, personally. Okay, so... And there might be reasons why, and I've spoken to a lot of these women, and we all come from the same school of thought. The game's popular. popular, it's interesting now how the game and those lead positions are being occupied by men. I'm not saying men shouldn't be in the game, they absolutely should. But when we talk about, we talk over the years at the FA, I set up a mentoring programme, UEFA talk about it, FIFA talk about it, we need more females qualified. Great. Let's get them qualified. Great. While we're getting them qualified, let's also give them the opportunity to utilise those skills. Some of the coaches that have been great for the game. Carolina Marachi, no longer involved, pro-licensed coach. Hesterine Deruz, no longer involved, was a coach of Australia. Vera Powell, I'm talking about these women that have lost their jobs to male counterparts. Vera Powell lost her job, thankfully is now with South Africa. Elizabeth Loisel lost her job to a male. Lois Fiddler, under 17, England coach, lost her job to a male, less qualified. Anne No, lost her job to a male, less qualified. So we have to look at this and go, okay, we're saying more and more women, we need them qualified. Great, I agree. And part of my job that I'm going to do now is I'm going to help that process. And I want to help it, it's a real passion of mine. If we're going to get more females qualified, we need more females front of house, on the grass, being part of the game, given an opportunity to lead from the front. So that, for me, is one of the biggest challenges we have, along with everything else. But we talk about coaching all the time. So when we talk about getting ex-players, the Faye Whites, the Casey Stoneys, all of those players within your associations, qualified, getting them involved, if you haven't got the opportunity to give them, they're going to leave the game. And I know a very good friend of mine, who has just decided that football, the game she's been involved in and developed for the last 20 years, she's had to step back. And that is expertise and knowledge you can never, ever replace. So for me, my final words, a challenge and a struggle in leadership on the pitch, off the pitch, has been my norm. From the day I played until the day I finished, it's been my norm. But my norm should not be the norm going forward for the next generation. It's wrong. And we, in this room, FIFA, UEFA, need to address it. So that's really what I had to say. So thank you very much. I'm happy to take questions, but I'd rather not. So thank you very much. Thank you. Do you want me to take questions?
Very passionate speech there from Hope Powell, which no doubt will be speaking about many of those topics in the afternoon panel debate on women in leadership. We touched on some of those issues this morning in women's football. We didn't talk too much at the time about female coaches, ran out of time for them, but perhaps we can pick that up more in the afternoon leadership debate. So it might be that we can persuade Hope to take a few questions a little bit later on. There's going to be a roaming microphone in the room, so do prepare for that. And questions from people who are following us on FIFA.com and the FIFA YouTube channel. Please use the hashtag FIFAWLFC, Women Leadership Football Conference, I think. Is that right? Is that right? Yeah, I had it right. Okay, now to our a second keynote speaker, Dr. Petra Jansa, on surprising facts. I can't tell you what they are, but I'm sure we're all going to be surprised as to what they are. Dr. Petra is a senior partner on the McKinsey & Company's Zurich office. Petra co-founded Advance, the first cross-company industry association, with the aim of increasing the number of female leaders in Switzerland.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure being here today. Coming from a business environment, actually quite something different. So even more, I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today. I think that was a very, passionate and emotional speech. I'm afraid I have like the boring part of this afternoon. I tried to make the facts surprising, but facts are what they are, and so we'll have to go through that a little bit and then use this as the base for the discussion in the forum a little bit later. The insights that I do want to share with you this afternoon are primarily from a business environment and business context. However, having listened to you, I think a lot of the themes will resonate with you, I hope. So, how do I actually move the slides? Here. So let's start off. Why? Some of you have probably heard about research that McKinsey & Company has been doing. We are a big international management consulting firm, and we've been facing problems with enough women in the pipeline, and even more as women become more senior for many, many years. That was the reason why a decade ago we started to look into our own organization to find out what is really going on. And as we do it as McKinsey consultants, we're always extremely analytical. That created a methodology that we then use to really understand what is really going on in the business environment and why are so many or so little women in leadership position, despite a lot of efforts over the last decade, I should say. So this is where the whole research started, and I will just quickly summarize. This has been a yearly effort. We've published actually quite regularly, and I will just take you a little bit through some of the basic facts. And then today, the focus of the discussion will be about corporate culture, because we truly do think that corporate cultures are probably the most limiting factor for women to succeed, and we'll talk a little bit about what does corporate culture mean really in a tangible way. So if we just look at where we are today, here you see the representation of women in both corporate boards and executive committees, and you see that in some countries actually quite some progress has been made. However, still after many years, and I think Germany just today approved the quota for boards in Germany, and other countries, in the Nordic countries, we've seen the similar thing. Nevertheless, there is some progress, but the progress is not strong enough. This is not only an issue for the today's situation. When we actually looked at what's happening to women as they come into organizations and progress further to the top, what we realized is there is not the one glass ceiling that is preventing the women from this very last step of getting into an executive committee or very, very senior levels within the organization. It is actually starting from the very beginning. You see those glass ceilings at every level, starting already at the very entry levels. And the numbers that you see here is actually the likelihood of a man being more successful as a woman. And if you take all of these together, the odds of a woman from an entry level getting to a CEO position, if you just calculate all of these numbers here, is like a 30-fold difference. We found this actually quite surprising because the business case, and that is what a lot of people sort of criticize. A lot of people say, yeah, it's fine to have women, but why? Why should we invest? Why is it important? We've shown actually, our research showed it, and Credit Suisse issued a report, I think, towards the end of last year, which really confirmed also those numbers. There is an absolute solid business case for having more women in leadership position. The company performance is better, and it is not a tiny bit better or a bit better, it is significantly better. If you look at those numbers, you see companies that have mixed leadership teams at the top perform have an average return on equity of, that's 50% higher. and more than 50% higher average EBIT margins. These are very, very significant numbers. It's not a little bit of peanuts and nice to have. There is a true business case why women should actually be promoted to get to leadership positions in organizations. In our study 2012, we showed that many companies are actually investing quite a bit in diversity measures. And you see here that, a lot of companies truly have, relatively big programs in place. Now, what is happening? Why are these things not having any impact? And we do think there is a couple of reasons for that. One is, it's just not enough for those measures to exist. I think Hope just said, we want more women in leadership positions, but still it's not happening. So there are gender diversity measures, but they also need to be implemented. They need to be lived in the business. They cannot be sidelined and delegated to diversity officers. It is actually a management responsibility, and managers need to make it happen day by day, and not, as I said, delegated to, a back office support line, so that we all feel better that we have gender diversity initiatives ongoing. Secondly, of course, one could argue those programs take time to bear fruits. That's true. The issue with that is that a lot of energy often sort of goes away. There is big energy around a program, it's being announced, it's being, senior leadership is quite vocal about it. But then when it comes to holding on for it for a few years and just really making sure you continuously support the women, as we've seen before, from the very bottom through the mid-level up to the top, the energy is often not there to just really hold on to the measures. And then lastly, and this is the topic where I want to go a little bit deeper today, we actually realized that, there is a lot about culture and mindsets in an organization that prevent women from getting to the top. So let's look at what that means. I do want to talk to you a bit about what women really want. And for that, a very big insight actually is that women want to get to the top. You often hear these arguments that women are not ambitious enough, or women are too shy, or they happily step back and take a role at home. While that in some instances might be true, it is actually not true at a large scale. And here we've actually researched very large corporations with a relatively large set of interviews that we've done with senior, mid-level to senior women. And what you see here is that the women have exactly the same high ambitions as men. It is sort of a little tale that women are less ambitious than men. At least from our survey and the research that we've done, it is not the ambition level. The women are also very willing to actually invest into their careers at a similar level as the men do. So we asked the question is, are you willing to sacrifice part of your personal life to reach a top management position? And out of all the women and men actually surveyed here, you get a very similar level of answer. It's like 64 to 61%. So again, not a substantial difference between men and women. Women are ambitious and they recognize it takes sacrifices and they're willing to do those sacrifices. So therefore, what could the difference be? And here comes actually a very, very interesting finding. Despite all of that, women are a lot less confident that they can really make it up to the top. And that does not mean they are less self-confident. That does not mean that they are not talking about, where they want to go and what their ambitions are. What we found here is a very fundamental distrust and a very fundamental disbelief that women can succeed in their corporate and business environments. And that is actually a very, let's say, difficult thing to address because it is very multifactorial, but it's also a very profound issue that corporations need to actually get their head around if they really want to promote women systematically to the top. So we came to the conclusion that corporate culture is the biggest driver of women, influence in women's confidence in reaching the top. And how did we actually get to that result? We looked at a sample of women who said that they wanted to reach a C-level, so CEO, CFO, everything, so executive team level. And then we split these women who said, I have the ambition to go there, into two groups. One group that said, I'm confident I can make it, and the other group, I'm not so confident that I can make it. And then we analyze sort of what are actually the differences between the group that feels confident of getting to the top and the group that felt not so confident of getting there. And what you see here, the gray boxes are what we called individual factors. So some women said, yeah, I'm maybe not as ambitious, willingness to sacrifice family life, or also the ability to promote myself. Versus, and that's the pinkish lines here, collective factors. There are leadership styles in my organization where I'm just simply not compatible. I'm speaking a language that's not heard in this organization. I have values that don't resonate with the values in that organization. And if you look at what really drove the difference between the confident versus the non-confident group, you saw that there was a much bigger difference between what we call the collective factors, the cultural factors, versus individual factors like ambition level and ability to promote yourself, or myself. Sorry, I think we can skip that one. So, we therefore think that addressing this topic of corporate culture that really enables women in their day-to-day sort of walk up to the top of an organization is the most important thing. But what do we concretely mean by corporate culture? Let's just look at that. So what are really the issues when we take a little bit deeper look into the organization? There is some good news. A lot of the men today in the business environment believe that having diversity in the workforce, having diverse leadership teams, really gets companies to a better performance level. So that is fundamentally a good starting point. But there are also not so good news. A lot of men in the organization, and you see here it's about a third of the men, do not see that, are unaware, let's put it this way, that there are specific topics and specific issues that affect women more than men. And unfortunately, that group of men, has even now developed into a group of men that does believe that gender diversity measures are unfair. So despite all the facts and the factual situation that we still have today, that women get, the further levels you move up, more and more underrepresented, there's actually a huge group of men in the meantime that believes that all of these diversity measures are completely unfair. And the issue here is the men that are aware of the difficulties for women in day-to-day, performing the job and succeeding over time to the top. These men are not necessarily thinking, or to a lower extent thinking, that that these measures are unfair. But the men that are totally unaware of the differences between men and women in the workforce, the more think that those measures and programs are completely unfair. Now, the issue with that is that we have also looked a little bit deeper into what group of men is it typically where we see those behaviors? And we have recognized that, at least in big corporations, the middle management level, the male management level, is the group which causes the biggest, let's say, glass ceiling effect for the women in the workforce. So often CEOs and the senior leadership team is actually quite committed. Often they have a vision and even give targets to the organization, not necessarily in terms of a quota, but in terms of, really wanting to have more women there. But then the implementation in day-to-day business life is almost like stuck in this middle level, who not only do not necessarily see that there are differences for men and women, but these guys also often think, or more and more think, that they as men are even being treated unfairly, despite all the facts and all the numbers, that should be very obvious. So what does it mean? If companies, and maybe FIFA, really wants to change sort of that dynamic, if getting more women, systematically promoted and up to the ranks, it means that men need to be more involved. Sorry, let me just skip this. It means that men need to be more involved. And, sorry, now I got completely wrong here. Sorry. No, I got the wrong side. So if we talk about the men involvement and really fundamentally changing the corporate culture, we have developed a view which talks about an ecosystem of measures that companies very systematically need to implement. And let me just talk a little bit through what that means. And we really think only the composition of, or the spiel of all of those different measures together will make a huge difference. So, or will lead to an impact in those organizations. First and foremost, we really do think that the commitment at the top of an organization, in the business world, it's typically the CEO, is one of the driving factors of really promoting more women. However, that alone does not fully do the trick. There is a need for making sure that women get, there is enough programs that actually help women overcome some of the obstacles that they face. They need to be trained up in really understanding the corporate code. They need to understand, how to, behave, argue, be present in that, very specific culture that's prevailing in that organization. But it also means that, all the, let's say, systems, be it HR systems, be it evaluation processes, be it promotion discussions and basis for promotion discussions, need to be much, much, much more objectivized. And the issue today is that nobody is really addressing that. Very often you see in companies, the guidance, we do want to have more women, but then promotion decisions, in particular at the middle level that we just discussed, are left to those men that have their own biases. And so these systems need to be worked through and need to be made fully gender neutral. Further than that, we very strongly believe that men need to be more actively engaged in the dialogue, and men need to better understand why it is important to have women, be successful in the organization, how the whole corporation really benefits from it. Secondly, on the cultural side, we do believe it's critical for women to have real sponsors in the organization, people that really actively look after women, open the doors for them, connect them with the right decision makers, and really make the career happen, as opposed to just nicely talking about it. And then lastly, there is something about, today's performance model and leadership styles in the organization, in organizations that are very often too male-ish, and where there needs to be actually an active effort done that women are being heard when they speak up, and that women actually have sort of a loud voice at the table and can make their often content-wise very valuable contributions. With that, I want to stop here and hope that that was a good fact base for the discussion in the panel right now. Thank you very much.
Yes, it was. Is a short answer. Oh, I'm attached. Please do come and take a seat, Dr. Petra. Thank you very much for your speech. The fact that I'm moving to a comfier location is an indication that we're ready to start our second panel debate of the day. Please do come and, you've got a choice, you're first up, so you can come as close as you like or go as far away as you like. We're going to continue that debate very much now and discuss. I mean, earlier on when we had our debate about women's football, we had our debate ourselves. We heard from the panelists first of all, and then we invited questions from the floor and from the Twitter feed using the hashtag, which I think you know about by now, FIFA WLFLC. One of those. Wish I mentioned it now. But this afternoon, if you'd like to actually maybe put your hand up during the debate, because it's pretty much one broader subject rather than the subdivisions we had this morning. So please do join in the debate as we have it once the panelists have been introduced, which I'm going to crack on with now. Dr. Petra, we know all about. Thank you very much. Lydia Nsekera, if you'd like to come to the floor, please. Those who are here this morning heard from Lydia, who is a FIFA Executive Committee member, the first woman to be elected as a full member of the FIFA Executive Committee after a decade serving as the president of Burundi. And she says that men and women must work together to promote women in leadership. If you are not fluent in French, shame on you, can't believe it, please do engage your little headset there so we can listen to Lydia, who will be speaking in French, and she'll be having everything translated for her as well. Delighted to welcome Carolina Müller-Moll to the stage, please. Carolina is president of the Müller-Moll Group and Foundation, a Swiss investor and philanthropist. What a lovely position to be in. And she's also been on the Nestlé board, and now sits on various advisory boards. The Müller-Moll Foundation focuses on the compatibility of work and family life and education, amongst others. So it'll be fascinating to hear from you. Piara Powell has been here all day. There we go. He's one of those hiding at the back. He must have had his big lunch that we talked about. Executive Director of the FAIR Network, an anti-discrimination and social inclusion body in football. They're active in over 40 countries, working with governing bodies and fan groups. Ruth Holdaway, somebody I know very well from the UK, Chief Executive of Women in Sport, which was formerly the Women's Sport and Fitness Foundation. It's recently had a name change. They're the UK's leading charity dedicated to transforming sport and for the benefit of every woman in the UK. Ruth's got experience across both public and private sectors. And last but absolutely not least, Amber Steele is our final panelist, Director of Football and NBA Management at the Coca-Cola Company. Have you heard of them? Small little corner shop at the end of a street near you. She oversees all of the company's football relationships, including FIFA and UEFA. Amber's worked in events and sports marketing for the past 20 years. Would you welcome our panellists, please? Did my A-level French, but I might just be plugging in, Lydia. Forgive me. Now, let's continue the debate. It was an absolutely fascinating discussion or speech and presentation there from you. To sum up what it was that you've discovered in your studies, what do you think is the single biggest barrier to women becoming leaders?
I truly think it is the collaboration between men and women in making it happen. If I should just point out one thing, then I would say it is exactly that.
Mm-hmm. Making it happen. How do we make it happen, Carolina? Nice easy one to start with.
Thank you for asking me that interesting question right at the start. Well, I always say it needs a lot to make it happen. It needs the women themselves. It needs, of course, the corporations, it needs society, it needs media, and all together it needs politics, it needs the right political framework. For example, here in Switzerland, I think we have not the right political framework. We have a lot of problems in combination with not having enough schools, daytime schools, and cribs, and all the rest of it. So I think it really needs all these 5 elements: the women themselves, the corporations, the right political framework, the media, which they usually don't help us much, us women, and last but not least, the society that needs to accept that women want to combine family and work life.
Right. We've only got a couple of hours on this. I think we could do it a couple of days, couldn't we? Oh my goodness. So you talk about it has to come from women themselves. If women could help themselves, but they need those other 4 factors to be in place. So it's a chicken and egg situation, isn't it? If those other factors were in place, not everybody wants to become a mum, of course, but if they do, and I was fascinated by your percentages, 61% to 64% of those who are willing to give up a part of their personal life to be successful. So it sounds like the will is there. If those other factors were in place, would women then be more comfortable, do you believe, in promoting themselves?
Absolutely, and we have learned that from Petra just earlier, right? I mean, it's not the lack of confidence that women really want to be at the top of corporations, but there is this glass ceiling, and I thought it was really interesting. I never looked at it that way, that in the middle management, that's where the problem lies. I didn't know that before. But it lies as well in the promotion of women onto boards. I sit on a couple of boards, as you know, and I experienced many times, I'll give you an example. I've been in the nomination committee of a company, and we were particularly looking for a woman to sit on the board. The headhunter we employed, a very big international headhunter, he came back with a list of about 40 men and only 2 women on the list. If I hadn't sat there and said to the headhunter, I refuse this list, you need to go back and work on more women for the list, and that was the long list, not the short list, of course it wouldn't have happened. Second point, they came back with my help actually, and at the end I can't remember, it was 10 women on the board, on the list I mean, and we were discussing every time again and again. At the very end there were 3 people left, one of which was a woman. And I was the only woman on the nomination committee. We were discussing if that woman is the right person to promote. And guess what? My 2 colleagues, they were saying, oh, no, but we can't promote her. She has already too many mandates, which happens a lot in Switzerland and probably happens in other countries too. So I quickly counted the mandates of the other 2 men that were on the list still. And it happened to be that they had even more mandates than the women. But you know, you need to sit there and you need to make the difference. You need to overcome these unconscious biases. Maybe that's something McKinsey has done a lot of studies as well, these so-called unconscious biases that you probably face many times in your life, as we heard in your speech, and we need to make them aware, and you can only make them aware if you yourself, once you are in a position to nominate, bring them to the surface.
You said that there were only 2 women initially on that list, then they went away, they found another 8.
Yes.
Why were those 8 not on there in the first place, and where did they suddenly find them from?
You probably need to ask the headhunter. Mm-hmm. I think it's a lot to do with these unconscious biases. They don't even think about putting women on a list, even in today's world. Or they come up with a hell of a lot of, or different funny excuses. I once said on a nomination committee, we were as well looking for a woman. The head of nomination committee went to speak to one of the women on the list. She was a professor in the UK, very prominent person, and he came back and he said the first thing she did wrong, she was wearing the wrong suit color. It was a red suit color. And of course, you know, once you sit there, you have to, what's about your tie today? You know, I like it. But, you know, I mean, it's just not an argument. And I could come up with some more unconscious biases that stop us women from making a career.
And that's not even in football. So if you're experiencing this outside of football, in the business world, imagine being in business, in football, or in, as Hope Powell says, in football coaching, or in football broadcasting. I can certainly vouch for, certainly in commentary, unconscious bias. absolutely no doubt that that's there. Lydia, what are your thoughts on this unconscious bias which prevents women from being promoted in the top level of football?
Well, I will perhaps surprise you. When I started moving in the world of football, I have never had any problems by anybody saying, hey, she's a woman. That's why I always say in football you have to work together. I came to my association, that was in the year 2000. The association had huge problems, and perhaps due to my character, due to my experience, I just rolled up my sleeves like the men did. And when you had to go to the Ministry of Youth and Sports in order to obtain a change for the federation, I went all together with the others. And when we went to see the president of the country, I went with them. And very often they called me. They said, hey, we want you to join us in this delegation, because I keep saying what I honestly think. And in the meantime, we have now had 3 years in Burundi, 3 years without a championship. We're constantly fighting and bickering. We had huge problems in our association, but never, ever during 9 years did anybody say, hey, she's a woman. Now, I keep saying, when you behave normally, then everything is normal. If you pretend you have a handicap, then they will treat you as a handicapped in Europe, in Africa, wherever you are. If you can, on the other hand, show your capacities to work, and if you're European in Africa, you will not be integrated. But in football, for instance, take it this way. You come to football as a woman, the men see that you are really showing what you can. Then, okay, but if you're showing, first and foremost, you're a woman, and then they consider you a woman in football, then you have a hard time. They will see first the woman. Let them see first your capacities. I was there for 9 years, and I can say that the first time, after 2 years, then the president of our country called me, and he said, oh, it's you, Lydia? Fine. I know that you are in a rebellious surrounding in our association, and the other president of the association is going to be there from 11 in the morning, from 11 in the morning to 11 in the evening. And we have an executive committee in the transition. We have 2 groups. So the president we have there, and then the other group with Lydia, that was then the general secretary in this group as well. They will have the second post. So we had a split, and we were preparing the elections. And they asked me, Lydia, do you agree? And we were 14 people in the room. Everybody kept quiet. Everybody knew that it was impossible. And I said, Mr. President, with all due respect, it's not going to work that way. The present president of the association, he's not going to organize elections. So he said, is it you speaking? I said, yes, that's the way it is, Mr. President. Okay, so you become president of the association now, because you speak up. So I said, I don't want. And then he said, you see, in Burundi we have mixed 2 different people groups, but you should organize it, and you organize the elections. So we accepted that solution. We went to the association, and a year later, FIFA said, you organize elections. And the president then in the association organized a committee meeting and said, no way, there's no elections coming. And then I said, hey, wait a minute, how can you say there will be no elections? FIFA is sending a delegation. By Friday, we need an answer. And he said, I am the president, so there will be no elections. Okay, then I called my group, 7 people, and said, we're leaving. We leave, and we leave the president with his committee in the room. It's the rest of the executive committee, and we say, we're going to send a letter to FIFA telling them to come. And that was Tuesday, and I said they have to come by Saturday to make sure whether we're going to have elections, yes or no. So I have a training in business management, so I can organize everything for 3 years. For the next 3 days. I had to see whether we had the championships to organize, who was responsible. I coordinated the work in 4 different regions in the country. And so traveling, it's just 2 hours one way. You take a bus. So finally, by Friday, I remember not having slept for 2 days. I was sitting there with my laptop because I was working from 10 in the morning to 3 o'clock in the morning, so we did not have internet. So everybody who came would come see me at home, deliver his report so I could prepare it and type it in and get ready to send a report to FIFA. So at the meeting, I came a bit late, but I had 2 huge folders. And the president looked at me and he said, oh, this is my end. And FIFA came and we had the elections settled. So the president had asked me if I wanted to become president of the association. I said, no way, I'm not going to be a candidate for the next elections. I'm a woman, and Burundi is a country where we have very often lack respect for women. And if I am to be chairman of the finance committee, okay, fine, but I'm certainly not going to be president of the association. I had lost my husband in the meantime. I said, I'm going to be insulted on TV. I'm going to be run roughshod over. But he said, you have to think it over. And he said, you must do it. Okay, I said, so if I am to accept, so why would you choose me, not somebody else? There's 45 other people in the Congress of the Association. I'm the only woman. How can you leave out 44 other people, 44 men, and come to see me? And he said, that's the way it is, because your reaction vis-à-vis the president of the country, we have looked at your attitude with the Ministry of Sports in the association. We are going to change a governance system which has been here for 12 years, and we need someone to change that, and someone who can say frankly what is needed, who can program that, and who is not afraid. But I said, yes, one condition. I mean, I saw all these problems coming. I do it under one condition. I will respect the regulations. But if people overstep the regulations, you are the Congress, you accept that they will be excluded from Congress. So we excluded over 9 years 3 people. In a nutshell, for me, it's important to work with the men and not put your gender forward, but put forward your capacities and be member of a club of men, because they still are the majority in Congress today in an association. I have a women's club, 3rd in the championship. I have my own club, but nobody remembers now that I was the president of a men's football club. So in my country, when they speak about me, they say, yes, she has been president of a men's club. They remember that as being more important. So if you are to look at an association, look at the Congress of this association and see what your position as a woman is going to be. So I can say this is the
Key messages in there. too much of me hearing myself. Some key messages in there. Thank you, Lydia. A couple of them about how important it is to work with men and alongside men. And if you behave as though you have a handicap, then you'll be treated as though you have a handicap. Amber, is that something that you've experienced on your way to the top at Coca-Cola, that you clearly haven't behaved that way, but do you sense that if women feel that they have the weight of the world on their shoulders, then they will act that way?
Well, first of all, I wanted to say thank you, too, for letting me be a part of today's panel. I appreciate it. I feel very fortunate to have my job, and I feel very fortunate football has given me a wonderful career. I've been in football my whole career, so I love that we have the opportunity to talk about it today. I think it's a very interesting question, because one thing that I feel that I think I myself personally am a little bit more cognizant of it than maybe others do. So in a sense that, first of all, I feel that something I always have to be aware of is I'm an American. So when you put an American female in front of many football crowds, they think I have no idea what I'm talking about, because I'm an American first and we don't know anything about football. And then second, I'm a woman, so I can't know anything about football. So I consciously always feel like I need to be able to show my credibility. So I feel like it's not in the sense that they might think that, but I automatically feel like I have to either maybe prove something a little bit different just to get a little bit of credibility. Because as I said, I feel like I need to just, so I try not to act that way. I just try to have the feeling to make sure that I, maybe state some credentials to make sure that people are aware that, I have experience in the game, and I feel like I know what I'm doing. So, I can add some credibility to what they're asking me for. So I think it's not the burden that they put on me, it's just something that I want to make sure that I can address, so it isn't a question in their mind from the beginning.
Ruth, as Chief Executive of Women in Sport, formerly Women's Sport and Fitness Foundation, you no doubt have plenty of thoughts on the issue of leadership and women in sporting positions, not necessarily football, but what's your broader spectrum experience?
Yeah, so at Women in Sport, we undertake an audit of women in leadership positions across sport every year, so that we can monitor kind of how many women there are in sitting on the boards of the national governing bodies of sport in the UK, and also women in the top level executive positions. And what we know from that work is that there are very few women in those positions, and we've also recently secured some funding from Comic Relief, which is a big charity foundation in the UK, to enable us to expand this work, so that in the future we'll be able to talk to women that are in those leadership roles and find out from them, how did they get there, what barriers did they face, what advice would they give to other organisations, and how can we change this in the future. But one of the things that we're very conscious of is not just focusing on the women that are in leadership roles now, or trying to get women into leadership roles now. We actually have to go right back to young girls at school, and we need to be talking to those girls about what it is to be a leader, give them that confidence to feel that, to feel empowered, to feel that they have every right to want to aspire to something in leadership. But also fundamentally for sport, what we know is that we have to also just open young girls' eyes to the types of jobs that you can do in sport. Because in the UK, sport is often thought of still as something that the men and the boys do. And we know, because we've asked young girls, that they don't really think about a career in sport. So they might be interested in something creative, they might end up working in marketing, but they're not at a really young age thinking, or in general, they're not thinking, I could go and work in football, and I could work in marketing in football. So a lot of what we're doing, and in fact we did a project a couple of years ago with the FA in the UK, looking at, it was called Kick Off Your Career, and it was just exposing girls to the opportunities that are available throughout sport, so that we're both opening their eyes to it, we're giving them a sense of ambition and helping girls to understand that it's as much their right to aspire to those positions as anybody else, and then also trying to support more women into those leadership roles. We know that currently across England, of the 46 national governing bodies of the different sports that we have, half of them have less than a quarter of their board made up of women. And there is a target in the UK that by 2017, all the national governing bodies have to have at least 25% of their board made up of women. So there are still half the organisations that need to get more women onto their boards. Things have improved over the last couple of years in particular, but it's really, really slow progress. And we also know from work that McKinsey have done and that EY have done, we know all about the importance of women in leadership, in business. Well, sport is a business, so that gender diversity is just as applicable to sport as it is to any other type of business. And we know that actually you need to be aiming for at least 30%. So our government has a target of 25%. We at Women in Sport are calling for that to be at least 30%, and we're doing what we can to support women into those positions so that we get sustainability. But I think we have to be doing, we talked right at the beginning about this needs to be a whole societal change. So we have to do what we can to make sure that we're talking to young girls now about what all of these opportunities are and making sure that those pathways are in place.
As part of the Inspiring Women in Sport campaign, I went into a school last week and spoke to a lot of girls about careers in sport, because when I was a lass, not woe is me or anything, but frankly, way back in those days, girls couldn't play football and certainly didn't aspire to careers in football. And I was interested that afterwards they came up to me and said, who's the most famous person that you've spoken to and interviewed, and what car do you drive? So obviously I had a big impact on them and inspired them greatly into wanting to work in sport, which I was delighted about. If people would like to come in on that point in a few minutes, I'd like to hear from Piara first, but about why there should be more women in leadership positions in sport, because I know certainly some people, possibly people who are watching on the FIFA.com channel at the moment, might be thinking, well, why do we need women, particularly working in men's football, because there is a drive to get more women in leadership positions. Why would football benefit from having more women in men's football leadership positions? If you give that some thought, and perhaps we could take some questions from the floor in that at the moment. But first I'd like to hear from Piara. You've been sitting there very patiently for quite a while now. We'd love to hear your experience of, as part of your job at FAIR across Europe, experience of discrimination and sexism, particularly in football.
Thanks, Jacqui. I know I'm the only bloke on the panel, so I have to do my penance, and that's okay.
We always have one.
I think that there are, over the course of the day, we talked about a lot of issues, and actually it's quite refreshing to step outside of football for a while and to hear about the corporate approach, particularly a Swiss corporate approach, which probably is, even more refined than many of the other corporate approaches across Europe. And I think, like a lot of people, Ruth mentioned it, obviously is familiar with it. Many of us have looked at the McKinsey work over the last couple of years and actually been quite inspired by it, because the McKinsey research defines the business case. It tells us categorically that there is a value to having diversity, gender diversity, and also a lot of my work is about racial diversity. And the way in which you talk to your audiences about the performance gain that you get from that diversity, from the diversity impact in management teams is incredible, I think. And so when you put that in front of people, people cannot argue against it, partly because of the McKinsey name and the methodology that you use and the way in which you have been successful over the years advising businesses. So this is no longer the arguments that we're making in the field, so to speak, are no longer fluffy or easily written off. They are scientific and rooted in real research. And I think sometimes some of us forget about the positive impact that diversity can bring, because we actually often, for good reasons, are worried about abuse, sexism, racism, homophobia, or we're worried about being excluded. But let's spin it out to the positive in some of the stuff that we're getting. And I think in general, we did some research with UEFA, which was launched in December in Amsterdam. And that was of European football, specifically about football, specifically in Europe. And we found that on the governance side, there were 4% of women involved at presidential level, vice presidential level, executive committee level, at federations, clubs, associations, all of the tiers that are relevant in football. And then on the executive level, we found that there were 12% of women involved. So again, the clubs, these are paid employees, chief execs, people in senior management positions. So there you have perhaps some of the leading clubs and some associations understanding the value that women can bring through their expertise, but nevertheless, that's ridiculous. Those figures are really very, very poor. And you see some really good, interesting examples. The French FA, for example, who I think have got a general secretary and a deputy general secretary who are both women. And the way that the French sort of talk about the feminization of football, which comes with the emphasis they put on women's football development, their hopes to host, I think, the next Women's World Cup after Canada. So there's an interesting sort of way of approaching it, but most countries don't approach it in that way. Most countries don't have the plans and the focus that we know is needed. In the end, I think, the UK is a very important market for football, has probably some of the longest history in football, the oldest clubs. Germany is the second biggest market. Germany is a country run by a woman. But in both of those countries, we see the football is lagging behind society. And partly because football doesn't accept the idea of either applying quotas or positive action through targets. If you talk to, whether it's the chief executive of the Premier League or even the historically, because there's a gap at the moment, the General Secretary of the FA, they do not want to talk about targets. They do not want to talk about the concrete ways in which they can increase their representation of women, ethnic minorities and other underrepresented groups. And for me, that's the issue. There is one surefire way of moving this on, and that is to set targets and to task the organisation to go and meet those targets.
Quotas have always been seen, certainly, I think it's fair to say in the UK, as being a negative thing, as if somebody was co-opted onto a committee because they're on a quota, that they're only there because they're a woman, and therefore that's a negative thing, that they would never have gone in there otherwise. Now people such as Karen Espeland at UEFA says, but that's right, I wouldn't ever have got here unless I was part of a quota. So quotas are a good thing. Yeah. Do you feel that quotas are a positive thing and are essential in business in general, or is it really in the possibly more backward thinking world of football that it's essential?
I think they can be a good trigger to expedite developments. I fundamentally would have one concern if it was only a quota and nothing else, because what you then see happening is you promote a few women into a board, maybe in an executive committee, but very hardly so. But then all the measures that we talked about to really fill the pipeline, systematically sort of charge to change, are often then not happening. So if quotas are there to expedite, yes. If quotas are there to do nothing else, then no, would be my clear vote.
Carolina?
I absolutely agree on that, and I think it might be, I'm always arguing, I don't want to be a quota woman myself. So, maybe for a couple of years, you could introduce a quota and then see what happens. And of course, as I mentioned before, the political framework needs to be there. For example, here in Switzerland, it's not good if both men and women work as a couple and they have children, and they have to send them to a day school and need to pay for it. The woman actually she can immediately stop to work because you have to pay higher taxes and so forth. I don't want to go into that. So these things need to be changed on top of the quota. If these things are not changed, we're going to be back to square one. So yes, it can be a starting point, but I wouldn't introduce it forever.
No,
yeah. And one thing I want to say is, I think the first McKinsey study was done in 2007. So that's so many years ago. And what you were saying before, these numbers that we saw now today, we have them since years, and things don't change. Why would you not want to change that if you know your company is going to be better performing, not only with numbers, but also on an organizational level? If you have women in a discussion when men are there too, it's just a better discussion. By the end of the day, it's more fun, I think, as well. So on an organizational level, it changes as well. Companies are far better off on an organizational level, not only on the number level. And that's just.
But if it's maybe men who are receiving the McKinsey study and they would need to have the motivation to read it and to take it on board and to implement it, is there perhaps an element of, well, we've always had men on our committees and we quite enjoy it being a bit of a man's club. That's the way it's always been. This is the way we always want it to be. Is there an element of that, particularly in football, do we believe? Totally. Certainly you feel in business.
Not only in football.
Totally. You feel in business.
That's exactly the topic of unconscious bias.
Unconscious bias.
Some companies are very consciously, even using that language. Often, and that's the tricky part to address, it is sort of an unconscious bias. It is just happening and people aren't even reflective of what is happening, but it's happening. We've always been men in dark blue or black suits, and so what are we looking for as successors for exactly the same thing? That is the unconscious bias.
I feel a hashtag coming on, unconscious bias. People will be tweeting in with their experiences of unconscious bias, particularly in football.
Can I, just to follow up on that, I think one of the things that I feel strongly about football, and this is the domain that I know, is that we have to force people to do this, otherwise they won't. I mean, I think the FIFA president referred to the debate that the Executive Committee had in terms of electing a woman onto the committee and then the two co-options. I know a similar debate, which was a difficult debate, happened at UEFA for Karen Esplund, the one woman that they have co-opted. These debates are always difficult, but the reason why I focus on quotas so much is because there's an equivalence, if you like, with black coaches. We have a lot of black players, that's obvious to see, but more or less zero black coaches in European football. Now, we often look to the US model, particularly the NFL, where they have something called the Rooney Rule, which is about positive action and putting people who have come through the pipeline in front of the people doing the employing and forcing them to confront the fact that they need to employ, one, two, that these are qualified individuals. So that's the bit, I think, where the dynamic that we need is for people to almost to feel a bit of fear that there will be a woman amongst you, or there will be 5 women amongst you, 30% or 25%, and let's make it happen. And let's also then mitigate what happens to the rest of us. We don't need to feel a threat, it's an opportunity.
I think the other thing, just to add, is the business case for gender diversity at the senior level is very clear now. But maybe what this tells us is that actually sport is more than just a business. So yes, and at the elite level, it is very much a business. But actually, if you think about sport from the field of play, as we like to talk about, to the boardroom, at the grassroots, we have armies of volunteers that are keeping sport going, certainly in the UK. And traditionally, those volunteers have been men, and therefore the structures at local level are created by those men. They've existed for a long time, and actually what we need to do is make some really fundamental changes to the structure of sport and the way that sport is organised in order to allow women to come through the system. So there's change at every level, and there's a lot that needs to happen, and I think that the business case, while being really critical, and certainly one of the reasons that we feel very strongly at Women in Sport that all of our national governing bodies really need to address this and take it very seriously, is because if we don't have change at the top and at the national level, then it won't filter down to the grassroots. But, we have to remember that it's as much about kids having a kickabout as it is about the national game, and we've got to be able to address those issues all the way through. Just one other thing as well on quotas, and I probably prefer to think about targets, because I think you're right. I think some positive action actually is essential, and quotas can be one way of achieving that. But I think that what you don't want to do, and often what I think people are afraid of, is that then a quota will be there forever and it won't, and that wouldn't be right. The whole point is just to kickstart something. But actually, it always just seems ridiculous to me when we talk about this issue, as if, and therefore the women that would get those positions because of quotas are just there because of the quota. Well, they're not. They're there because they're really good at what they do, and because they're just not being found. We talked about the long list for board positions, that it just doesn't include women. It's not that there aren't great women out there ready to take these roles. There are. So I think we also have to just get away from thinking that if quotas or targets have been in place, those women are only there because of that quota. They're there because they've got the skills and the ability to take on that role. They just needed to find a way into the system.
Lydia, your thoughts on quotas? Should they be implemented across the board to get more women in senior football leadership positions?
Well, yes, at the first moment, yes, quotas are important to develop leadership, but we have 209 national associations, and in these, FIFA has been able to find 3, 4, 5 women who can sit there on top. But in the national associations, there are no women at all in leading positions, neither in the structure nor in the club. And when you look at football structures, you have the executive committee, you have the associations, and in these associations, then you have the clubs depending on them. And before we even talk about a quota, in the national associations, the women must be present in the clubs, that the clubs are being seen and heard, and that women are in the clubs. And then you will have women moving up to the Congress from there. And when you have women in the national congresses, then it is time to say, okay, we need a quota. But how can you ask for a quota if there are no women in the first place? The clubs are private matters. You cannot tell the clubs, you need this and that, you need so and so many women in the club. Clubs are private businesses. So, yes, we need quotas, but in the first place, we need to know where can we ask for a quota. In the top echelon, middle segment, we have here Moyada, there's me, etc., Sonia BNMA, but first you have to look at the associations, and if they have no women, it is difficult to establish a quota. And I have been the president for so many times. No president of the clubs will accept quotas being imposed upon them by the executive committee, because first and foremost, they will say, well, where are these women you want? So we, the women, must make the effort because it's male clubs.
Where are the women in football to make their way to the tops? Now, at Coca-Cola, Amber, you have leadership mentoring schemes.
Correct.
Presumably you have good women who you can promote on the way to the top. Tell us about those schemes.
Well, there's one program, and I would like to talk about it. It's called 5 for 20 that Coca-Cola has, and we're trying to empower 5 million women by 2020 to be entrepreneurs. And one of the things I think that we all would agree with is it's trying to create an environment, too, that helps women raise to the top. So that could be education or teaching. It could be financial assistance by helping them get to a different level if they're an entrepreneur. And then the last is mentoring. So a way that you can go talk to another woman if you have any challenges. And we feel that this will help, again, the society as a whole, because women, we feel, are really the pillars of a lot of communities. So, empowering the woman helps the whole community rise to the top. So, we feel those 3 things are really important. Helping to create the environment.
Helping to create an environment, and that can be relayed in all sorts of environment, whether it's football, other sports, or business in general. Keen to get some thoughts from the floor. I believe we've got a roaming microphone. If not, I've got one here, which I can... You don't want me to get up, do you? Oh my goodness. Right, hang on. I think I'm attached.
I have a question. Do you also try to mentor men? Because, of course, you need to take them
Correct.
on board as well. And I find many of the studies that you can see today is really more important even than promoting or mentoring. There's a great article by a professor of Harvard we women, we're over-mentored but under-promoted, which is probably right? But that question
I think that's a great point. And I think one of the reasons why I feel I've been successful in certain situations is really the person that is backing me up, or my boss. I've had some, I actually worked at FIFA for several years, and I had a great boss who put us in positions, but we always knew he was a man, was backing us up. So, for instance, in 2002 FIFA World Cup, I was in charge of the marketing for Japan. So again, I went into a room filled with Japanese men who didn't understand why they were going to have to deal with a female on, the marketing of the FIFA World Cup. And my boss made sure that every time they tried to call him, that he refused, and they had to force to talk to me. Because of that support, I always felt even more confident in my decisions, and I knew that he would always back me up. And eventually, the Japanese had to deal with me, the local organizing committee, because they had no other choice. And so, as you said, mentoring, I think being a good manager and really promoting your staff and making your staff feel great about themselves and in the environment they're in, and helping them with their strengths and weaknesses, again, creates an environment for both men and women to help them be promotable and help them be more successful. Because I believe if you're not, someone once told me that you're a great leader if the team that you lead can lead by themselves. So if I leave a company, my team is still successful and they still can move. A lot of people feel that when you leave a company, you hope that it all falls apart and everybody says, oh, I miss you so much, and if she left, and it's not the case. When you leave, you hope that your team is running better than it was when you were there. And that, for me, is a true leader. And that's what I hope I instill in the team that I have, is that they're confident and great, and when I'm no longer there, they're going to do better than I would have done.
It's interesting, there's a lot of talk that I've heard in the past about female bosses not necessarily being a great thing. Anybody like to, there's a few people nodding about that, there's a lot of people nodding about that. Who'd like to come in on that? Who's desperate to talk about female bosses and the influence that they can have?
I think there's some research out, at least, that shows.
Love a bit of research. Come on, Dr. P.
Some research out that shows that women are harsher with women than with men, and that is.
Yeah, why?
The why is not answered in there, but there is a.
That's rubbish
but
research.
it's a clear finding. Yeah.
That women are. Yes.
Interesting research as well from Harvard Kennedy School. They asked about 1,000 students whether they would want to have Jack or Jane as their CEO. Both had absolutely the same qualification in the background. And even the women answering the request were certainly thinking that Jack would be the better CEO. And there we come back to men promote men, but women promote men as well, because the concept of leadership and women just doesn't go together. Why doesn't it go together? Because you don't see it. There is too little, and that again speaks for quotas, there is too little women out there, too little role models. And if you don't know about it, why should you trust it?
How much,
so that's another quite interesting psychological
How much of that
fact.
is because of the fact that women are the ones who have the children? Is there a sort of unconscious bias? Is that trending it? A bit of an unconscious, that whether they have children or not, they might have children, and therefore, do we want to promote them? Is that
That's probably just one of the factors. I mean, the children's thing, right? But I think there's far more psychological issues that people and women just don't believe that women can be great leaders. Because we don't see it, we don't experience it. I mean, that's one of the major facts, at least what the studies say about unconscious biases.
And there was one specific finding that the difference between female and male bosses was that the female bosses were particularly unforgiving on the weaker associates, the weaker colleagues. Whereas the men, in particular, if it was a woman, there was more forgiveness, and they would still stay in the workforce, they would still be promoted to a certain level. However, female bosses have a lot less forgiveness for underperformance, which might then also lead to the view that women are the tougher and probably not so fair bosses.
Is that because women have perhaps had to work harder to get to the top and had to be tougher to get there in the first place? So therefore they look at the people coming behind them and go, well, you're not as tough as me, I'm not going to promote you.
Could be one driver, and the second one could be that they do not want to be seen as sort of clubbing up with the other women and giving them a, advantage over the men.
Yeah,
I don't have any research to prove it, but I feel at times it's a competition. So there's very few leadership top positions that are for women, so I find at different corporations you see them competing for that job. So they feel like there's only 1 or 2 spots for a woman, so they feel like they're competing against that woman.
Is there insecurity perhaps about a woman who's had to work really hard to get into a senior position, and she's thinking, well, I've had to work that hard to get there, I don't necessarily want to promote other women underneath me. Is that an issue?
I think that it can be, we all know that it's lonely at the top. You need support, and actually if you are in a senior management team, senior leadership team, as I have been, the only woman in that team, a team of men, not only do you have all the issues about how tough it is to be a leader, and it is quite tough, and it can be challenging and difficult at times, but then if you're the only woman, certain assumptions can be made about you. We all need support, and I think this is why mentoring programs are important. We run one as part of our Women's Sport Network, but we're very clear that that network is open to men and women, and we are trying to change the culture of sport, and that requires everybody within sport to participate in that. So I kind of feel like we just have to be careful about making too many assumptions about women in leadership roles. I think some of the challenges that women face are actually the challenges of being in leadership, as opposed to necessarily having anything to do with being a woman. But actually, if you are running an organisation or part of a small team that's running an organisation and you're the only woman, then it can be difficult. And one of the other things that we're keen to do in terms of our work is that there's an assumption. So, there's another argument in sport for having more women in leadership roles, and that's about inspiring participation and making sure that women's sport is being thought about, and the needs to the needs of boys are being thought about in the boardroom, and that decisions are being made that are going to be appropriate for women and young girls as well as for men and boys. But what we don't want to do then is pigeonhole the women that are in leadership roles as being the ones that are responsible for women's sport. So you're the woman on the board, you're the one that makes all the decisions about, all the women's work that we do. We don't want that. Those women, as I've said before, are there because of the skills and experience that they have, because they're the right people. They might be the finance director, might be a marketing director, whatever it is. But we need to make sure that the women's side of football, in this case, but any sport, isn't forgotten about, and that the right decisions are being made at the highest level.
It seems to be that one of the issues of women in football, certainly that I've discovered, is that you're lumped into one basket as women in general. Certainly in my case, when I was coming through as a football commentator, it was, do men want to listen to women if they didn't like me as a commentator, and they don't like women commentators full stop, whereas actually just want to be judged as an individual. Whether you're a footballer, it's easier to be judged as an individual then, but certainly as a coach, and in any kind of area of football, you just want to be judged as an individual rather than, if Sian Massey raises her flag and, she got that decision absolutely spot on, brilliant women football referees and assistants, but actually she's brilliant at that moment, she got that decision right, and you all seem to be lumped into a one box, whether you're good or you're not good because you're a woman. Sorry, you've been holding your microphone for ages. What was it you wanted to say?
Okay. So just like there was the same like Ruth and Amber was saying, in Sweden we really worked really hard with the clubs, and I think it's also important to say that it's not a responsibility for the women's football to bring out the women in leadership. It's also the men's side of it. And we can see the increased numbers of our women clubs up in the boards, so it's very, very good. But when we talked with the girls in the clubs, who are about 15 to 16 years old, and said, why aren't you a young leader and they said that you never ask me. You never ask a girl who's 15 years old if she wants to be a leader. I'm not talking a leader for a board member stuff, but you can start as a young leader. But we often ask the boys if they can be the leader of the younger boys. So there is really a mentor. And it's also one problem that Ruth and Amber always said that I think is a big, big problem that we talked about. And that's the room, the places of the traditional format. It's only one woman, so we have to struggle against each other. And that's why we lost really, really good another women. And you can put in more work to increase the numbers of women in the committee instead, and not struggle against another women. So that was the same.
Thank you. This lady in the front here is keen to make a point as well. If you could introduce yourself, please, and tell us where you're from.
Thank you very much. My name is Ruth Maporisa, the co-chairperson of the International Working Group on Women in Sport. I just wanted to comment on the issue of quotas. I think it's a very interesting one. And my issue here is that if you're going to use quotas as some kind of a checklist as to whether you are achieving in terms of involving women, then it will yield a totally different result, as opposed to looking at quotas as a means towards achieving participation in a more meaningful way. If you're going to have 5 women in a board of 10, that's 50%. So what is this 50% saying to us? Are these women in positions that play a critical role in this board? I think that's what matters at the end of the day. Are they able to influence decision in this board? Or is just the question of, okay, fine, I'm having 5 women, and more often than not, we report these quotas in percentage. And percentage can be misleading at times. If we say 2% within the FIFA leadership are women, what is 2% at the end of the day? It may be meaning one person being represented in this leadership positions. So I think we must see quotas as a means, not an end in themselves, towards achieving something, towards making more meaningful role that women can play at the end of the day in the area of making an impact. And I also want to believe that, I don't know, I would like to put it to the panelists as to whether there's any correlation in terms of talking about women in leadership in sport, and also comparing that to the general status of women's equality in a particular setting. Because I don't think when you talk about women in leadership in sport, is an isolation of the general status of women in terms of advancing their cause in terms of equality. Thank you.
Anybody on the panel want to come back on that?
On the last point about where is the focus on women in leadership? Is that correct? Well, I mean, I think, look, every governing body of sport, because from the IOC down, has some pressure on it to diversify. How successful they are is up for debate. Some are more successful than others. And if you take football, my sport and our sport, then there are some clear leaders in this room. You know, the people, the women amongst us, 2 women amongst us that are on the FIFA Executive Committee. They are the leaders. They're in the top positions. And I think they do that very well. It's obvious that they do that very well. So in many ways, there is also a burden of leadership on them to drive forward, to raise these issues within that executive committee and other spaces. That's not always easy. It's not only down to them, but in the end, that's what happens with pioneers. They get the brunt of some of the resistance that you face, first of all. And I think that's a role that, from what I can see, people are beginning to take on quite actively as well. I have a lot of conversations with Moya, and I can see what she's doing. And I think generally there's, things are changing a little bit. When you have, without disrespecting the building I'm in or the other organisation I work with, when you have people at the highest level of FIFA and the highest level of UEFA talking about these issues as something that they need to address, then we are already further on than we were 3-5 years ago. And I think, as we know, the first conversations, the first initiatives, the first drive is always the most difficult for many people. And from here on in, I think we need to build on that. And also be very clear about the creative way in which we do that, the drive in which we do that.
We will talk about coaches in a moment, because that's a really important topic to come on, raised by Hope Powell, is she still here? A little bit earlier on. But Moya, it'd be really good to hear from you on this subject. If we could have a microphone down to Moya, please, for the moment, seeing as you're in the room. Perhaps not everybody was here earlier when we were on the women's football panel, but your thoughts about quotas, about women in leadership positions in football, and the responsibility that you have to be able to, it's on your shoulders, to be able to inspire other women to come through.
Thank you. I should probably face this way, I guess.
Yeah.
I'd like to make a couple of comments on quotas. I've seen there's a bit of a debate on Twitter about that, and I know you've been having the debate in this room as well. I think that in a perfect world, quotas aren't necessary. If you have a well-functioning merits-based system, which we would all like to have in every industry and every body that we work in, then you don't need quotas, obviously. But there are bodies, and football bodies, FIFA, the AFC are two, who have looked at their systems and said, you know, that's not going to work fast enough to have the kind of impact that we want to see, and we don't want to wait decades for women to come through and deliver gender diversity. And football has been such an overwhelmingly male sport that I think it's particularly important for it to gender diversify, for it to get that diversity, because it clearly has so much to gain. The sport has so much to gain by bringing in that kind of diversity. So, and I'm very sure actually that I wouldn't be standing here talking to you, I wouldn't be in this position were it not for quotas. So if you want to know what a quota looks like, it's me, actually. And whether I do a good job or a bad job is not for me to judge in the end, it's for you all to judge. But I do know that I have a perspective, I bring a perspective, and Lydia brings a perspective, and Sonia Bienemy brings a perspective into the FIFA Executive Committee room that would not be there otherwise. And I think diversity of perspectives is valuable in any organisation, football or otherwise, because you make better decisions when you have diverse perspectives in the mix. I mean, there's even evidence, we've seen some of the McKinsey studies, which I think it's slam dunk. I mean, it's not even debatable anymore that companies are more profitable when they have women at executive levels. I mean, that kind of evidence is, well, it's kind of irrefutable. And when you see that kind of evidence, there's even some I saw that said companies have less fraud and less corruption when you have women on boards. I don't think that's because women are necessarily more honest, but I think if you have diversity, then more questions are asked, more things are scrutinised, and you don't have, you know, a homogenous, unquestioning environment or a groupthink environment which leads you to make bad decisions. So I'm a believer in quotas in football, because I think that you get the benefits way sooner than you would otherwise of having women at the table. So that's your first question about quotas. I think your second point was about role modelling, is that right?
Make it the second point.
I think, I don't think about it too much. I think I just want to do a good job. And in the end, I don't really want to be famous for being female or the first woman on this or that. I just would like to be known for doing a good job. But I'm very conscious that because you're one of few females there, you are noticed more. What you do right may be noticed more. What you do wrong may be noticed more. And so I think in that sense, it makes you more conscious of it. But I also think that there is a large constituency that we represent, because we didn't come through the normal, you know, we're quota positions. We're quota positions because we wouldn't come through the normal process. And so we represent people who would not be represented through the normal process. And I do feel the burden, if you like, or the responsibility to represent those who do not have a voice within the traditional governing constructs of football. The many women who play or want to play but can't and don't and aren't represented within the game. Can't vote me in or out, actually. but they deserve to have a voice at the table where the decisions are made. So that is, I think, the greater responsibility that I feel.
Have you been a mentor? Are you prepared to be a mentor in FIFA in particular for women?
Of course, I think mentoring can be formal or informal, and I've been lucky to have mentors who, never formally but informally, who helped me. And I think one of the great things about women working in football is their incredible generosity towards each other. I know sometimes people feel we're put in positions where we have to compete with each other. I have been very fortunate to be the beneficiary of a lot of generosity from peers and colleagues and others who've just been happy to help, have been happy to put aside geographic, political or other, tribal or other sort of loyalties and be prepared to help in the best interests of the game. Sometimes I think I'm the luckiest person in football because I get to work a lot with these kind of people. And so there is an enormous generosity in the networks, in the people in this room. You're a network. You help each other. I know you do. And you help me, many of you. So that kind of generosity comes around and goes around a lot in women's sport, and it's what sustains a lot of the energy in the game.
Just while you're on the floor, Moya, don't go anywhere, because I'd like to bring in the subject of female coaches, which we haven't talked a lot about this afternoon. We heard from Hope Powell making some very strong, passionate points earlier about the number of good senior women's coaches losing their jobs to male coaches, in particular, with fewer qualifications. You're a former player yourself. What's your view on the fact that there are only 8 of the 24 participating nations at this summer's FIFA Women's World Cup, led by women? They're Germany, Switzerland, USA, Ecuador, Thailand, Cote d'Ivoire, Sweden and Costa Rica. That's 33%.
I think Hope made some very pertinent points today. One of the 10 principles is around the importance of female coaches, not only because we have a rapidly growing player population in women's football, who we have to serve with coaches. So it's not just because we need the numbers, but I think we also want to retain the quality and we want to give fair opportunities to women to work in that area of the game. I do think it's one of the most difficult things to be in football as a woman is to be a coach. And I'm not one, but I'm in awe of the people who do it well, because I think it is one of the toughest jobs in football. It is a job where by nature you have to take charge, you have to be in authority, and that's the dictatorial nature of what we set up as coaching. If you have to be in charge, and social norms are not that women are in charge. Social norms are that men take charge and that women take care, to quote a phrase. So, but when you're a coach, you have to take charge. So already you have to challenge some of the expectations people have of you by being strong and authoritarian and having a strong view. And not only that, but doing it right in the epicenter of football, on the field. And that's something which, as you have told us, Jacqui, you're not always credited with knowing anything about football. You said that too, I think, Amber. And, a lot of guys you meet think you don't really know much about football, so you have to kind of demonstrate that. So I think female coaches I think it's harder to be a high-level female coach than it is to sit on an executive committee as a woman. Firstly, because there are no quotas, and secondly, because all of the people who put you there, selection panels, and keep you there, colleagues and bosses and boards. If you look at the constituents of those populations, I think you'll see reflected many of the same things we've heard people talk about Petra and Caroline talk about in corporate life. There are unconscious biases built into that system all the way through, which those women coaches have to overcome and keep overcoming every day to keep those jobs. And of course, coaching is notoriously volatile as a profession.
Thanks
it nearly always ends badly.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Moya. Yes, Sally Horrocks.
Thanks, Moya. It's Sally Horrocks from the English Football Association. It strikes me that we're talking this morning and this afternoon about, realising the value of female talent, both in sport through women's football, but then this afternoon also through business, through listening to the speakers. And we can't ignore 50% of the population. I think the point's been made really powerfully. It just doesn't make business sense. It's our stock is rising, as Moya said this morning. But I just wanted to make a positive point, which is that my experience is when you can identify some of the male role models in senior positions, I think, Petra, you made this very clear this afternoon, progress can be incredibly rapid with inspirational female leaders combined and harnessing their talent with some brilliant men. Then you really can move things on quite rapidly. And that's my experience as a lawyer working in quite a discriminatory environment, in the legal profession first, and then in sport, and then in the broadcast sector and the commercial sector. So I just wanted to leave that point with you, and if anyone had any other positive experiences, I'd be keen to hear them. And it's certainly one of my experiences at the English Football Association. But harnessing the power of men and women together in those leadership roles, I think is really powerful.
Yep, men and women working together. Alex Stone of FIFA, formerly of English Football Association fame. Greatly missed.
Too kind, Jacqui. I just thought I would add something from social media because you've been selflessly promoting the hashtag today. This is definitely the topic of quotas, the most sort of polarizing topic of all day. Lots of people commenting. The interesting thing is whether people believe it or not, and a lot of people say no actually to quotas, and they're mainly women responding saying that they want to have positions but to have them on merit. But a number of people saying that the topic that we're talking about is mainly about leadership, and what they would like to see is more women encouraged to be involved at all levels of the game, because then if there are opportunities to get involved perhaps in coaching or in sports medicine, or whether it might be in media work, communications, marketing, what have you, that by getting sort of involved in the sport, they may then have more opportunities to then progress based on sort of meritocracy and based on their experiences. So just some feedback from social media, but if people want to look at all the comments, we've been retweeting them, this is the plug part, at FIFA WWC, and lots of different opinions. So it's an interesting one that probably in this view there are different views, and certainly across the world there seem to be very different views at the moment.
Great, thanks very much, Alex, and please do keep those tweets coming if you like to. Anybody else from the floor like to raise a point on any of the topics that we've made? Yes, Sandra Gage, who we heard from this morning, who's... I think you do need a microphone. You do need a microphone. People can't hear you at home, at their desks, when they're supposed to be working.
Okay, there we go. Just to follow up on your positive comments, and Amber and I were talking about this at lunch. We've both benefited from strong male mentors, so I don't think, it's the person. And actually, when you get into a C position, this is the first position I've had in sport where I'm called a chief, it's about what I do in the role. It's not about the fact that I got the role. So that's a responsibility, but it's very important that it's about what you're doing in it. It's not the position. And I think part of the challenges of women working for women is that women get into these positions and all of a sudden have to compensate or feel that they do and don't have the confidence to just do the job for the reasons they were given the job. So hopefully people will gain confidence. I think your study spoke to that. That's one of the things. What did I want to say? 65% of our staff are females on the FIFA Women's World Cup. That is a conscious choice, a conscious bias. And that was decided by men. And that's a positive. So we're proud of that.
Okay, plenty more positive points being made. Yes, lady towards the back there. Always good, as well as raising the issues, and obviously there's going to be some negative issues about the lack of women at the top of businesses and what have you, but the point of this debate is to try and get some solutions as well, and to get some ideas that can then be implemented when we all go away from this conference. Yes?
Thank you. My name is Kimberly Morris. I work with FIFA TMS, the transfer matching system. I'm actually the head of integrity and compliance, and I and my team monitor the international transfer market worldwide. Thank you very much, first of all, to the panel for your comments today. Very interesting. My involvement in the world of football has been just 3 years. Prior to that, I was in the corporate side of things. So what the McKinsey report talks about is certainly something that I've experienced in the corporate world. And I'd be interested to hear what the panel has to say or comment upon in terms of the individual responsibility that we have as women to find male mentors, to find other women who will help us mentor each other. I think it's really important to recognize that there is room for growth. I have the opportunity in my job to go throughout the world and talk to football associations and clubs. And what I've heard is that there are lots of women who not only play the game, but also internationally, not only in the English experience, but in India, in places like Colombia, there are women who work for clubs, represent clubs, and who are trying to develop leadership roles for themselves. So it is happening. I can also say that most of the letters that I send out go to clubs and associations who assume that I'm a man. So when I show up at their front doorstep, they're always surprised that I'm a woman and that many of my team are women. However, they're always very welcoming, and I think part of it is to do a really great job. If you do a great job and you perform, then you're accepted, and certainly that's something that's very important. But I think that the people here, and maybe the panel could talk about the collective importance it is as women to promote ourselves and work together to support each other in terms of leadership.
Yes, Ruth.
Yeah, I want to try to tie a few things together if possible. So a bit of a shameless plug for the Women's Sport Network that we run, because we have a mentoring programme within that. So if you are in the UK and you are working in sport, in football, and you are looking for a mentor, come and join the Women's Sport Network at Women in Sport, because we can help you with that. I think, but some of the points that are being made on social media as well are really important about saying, you know, it's not just about women at the top, and I suppose it's something about saying leadership exists throughout organisations, and it exists throughout football, actually, and we need leaders at every level, and that's why some of the work that we do in schools and that we did with the FA, Kick Off Your Career, around just opening young girls' eyes to the possibilities that exist, the types of roles that you might be able to get involved in, I think is really, really important. And one of those roles, to kind of try to segue us back a little bit into coaching, obviously is around coaching. And this is probably less of a comment from Women in Sport and more of a personal one from me, because this is something I feel really strongly about, actually. I just find it ridiculous and very difficult to understand why there are so few women in coaching positions. So across sport in the UK, only 17% of all the qualified coaches are women. Why is that? It makes no sense, actually, to me. And I think it is so important, because nobody questions when a man is coaching women. But when a woman is coaching men, take a recent UK tennis example, forgive me, it's not football, but, you know, Amelie Mauresmo coaching Andy Murray, so many questions about, you know, well, she wouldn't be able to be in the locker room. Well, hang on, none of the male coaches are in the locker room with women. You know, it's just ridiculous, actually. And there are probably many reasons why the numbers are so low, but there's a massive opportunity there, a huge opportunity. There will be so many talented women who would just make fantastic coaches. And yes, role modelling is part of it, but actually just making it accessible, making sure that women know that this is something that they can do, and actually encouraging women to get involved is going to start to build that pipeline. And I think it's something that we could change, and we could change quite quickly. And I would encourage everybody in the room to really take a look actually at your coaching programs, think about women's lives and what it is that motivates women, and then match those two things together so that you make sure that your coaching programs are accessible and are going to be appealing to women.
Yeah, really important point we touched on before. I'm really keen to hear from Hope here, if we can give Hope a microphone, if you'd like to just speak a little bit more about the barriers perhaps to women. Do you think that players who are coming through, who've had great careers in the game, are retained enough? What more can be done to retain their services? And is it because the opportunities aren't there for them to coach, or do you feel they don't have necessarily the confidence within themselves to go on and then be coaches and perhaps make themselves unpopular in the dressing room by making those decisions? Is there any reason why they wouldn't want to do that?
I can't remember the first question. No, just kidding. I think there's numerous factors. I think you have to recognise that not every player wants to become a coach, number one, so you lose quite a high percentage anyway. Another thing, and something that the FA have really done well, is they've helped fund those ex-players to become coaching. Coaching, certainly football coaching in England, is very, very expensive. So, you know, and expensive and time-consuming. So, to fund a coaching course, I was very lucky. I got all my courses, except for my first course, funded through the Football Association. I would never have been able, in a million years, to be able to afford to do the A licence because of the amount of money it costs. So,
roughly how much does it cost?
I think when I did it, I think it was £7,000, possibly, in that region. So I was lucky enough to have my sort of coaching along the way funded. So it's really expensive for, and you're not just talking about ex-international players, you're talking about females in the game that perhaps want to go on and be coaches in the game. It isn't cheap, you know, and that's something that I think really stops women being involved. It's expensive, and then they look at the options to coach after and almost get that money back, if you like. The opportunities are too far and few. So if I've spent a year trying to get my B licence, 2 years trying to get my A licence, and then I don't have the opportunity to utilise those skills or earn a bit of money, why on earth am I going to do it? So the opportunities have got to be there. So somehow we've got to make sure that while we're upskilling all these women to become coaches, and remembering not all of them want to be, we also have to provide opportunities for them. And there are lots of coaches that are qualified that are no longer in the game because they don't get the opportunity to coach. And especially as more and more men are coming into the women's game to coach, there are fewer and fewer opportunities for women to coach.
You've talked a lot there about lack of opportunities. Yeah. Why is that? Is it the lack of desire from clubs, say, for example, in the senior women's league in England, which is WSL, there's one female coach out of 8 there. Do you think there is an unconscious bias against promoting female coaches, or is the talent not there? Have they not had the grassroots
I think the talent's there. I don't think it's just that. I think even if you look at men's football, there are a number of male coaches that are unemployed. There just aren't enough jobs, unfortunately. So when you're looking at it in that respect, then the women's game has been, there are more and more men coming into the women's game, there are going to be fewer and fewer opportunities for women. You know, the game's growing, and, you know, there are more coaches. A lot of the coaches are volunteers. Some of them, you know, you talk about a career pathway. A lot of women that go into the game now, especially now, it's a great opportunity to make a career in football, even in coaching. But the opportunities, we have to look at how many jobs realistically are there compared to how many qualified coaches that we have. It's difficult.
So I know of a senior club somewhere in Europe a couple of years ago. I was talking to the chief executive there, and he actively wanted to employ a woman. And he looked and he looked, and he just thought that there weren't enough senior, credible candidates, and so he appointed a man, which is a major disappointment to those women who are looking for opportunities. So there's a disconnect somewhere. Wondering where that is and what do you think needs to be done? You talk about opportunities need to be there, but what practically, if you were in charge of this situation now, what would you do? Would you say national associations need to fund more females because the women aren't earning the money in the professional game in the way that the men are? Yes, you've got I think this is a translation. You're from the French Association. Got your Channel 1, everybody. Should the associations fund coaches?
I'm Brigitte Reques, and I'm a former player, and I have the license B for coaches.
I have many things to say because I'm fascinated by what you are saying. In French, it will be easier. Now, this education program for coaches, we have seen in France the same things you have mentioned. Many things must be taken into account in order to have coaches. You must train the coaches, and the associations should have a program for coaches. In France, for instance, when we started in 2011 with the new mandate, we had 600 of them, and we want to have 100,000 in 2016. So we have a program, Ladies Step Forward, it's called, and we want all these trainers and coaches, and for boys and girls, we want all categories 8 to 10. And we have mothers who spend more than 4 hours per day on the pitch. So we want to see all these women who come to the clubs regularly and involve them in training programs, and they can just be there, they can coach, they can train, they can lead, they can do many things. And in a matter of 3 days, we moved up to over 600. And we have 8 academies. We have academies under 16, under 18, and sometimes these train 5 times a week. And during school holidays, we have activities we can propose to these players and also to these ladies. We want to give them 250 diplomas per annum. And then we have also this program for former players. There's huge potential there for the development of women's football, to give them possibility to move upwards, like for Hope, that she can move up to the A and B licenses and what have you. And we have, of course, our international players. They get a certain kind of support. They are training 4 times per week. It is covered by the association. And we hope to have a certain reserve of women with A and B license until 2016. So we can really have a choice among possible candidates for coaches in the higher echelons, be able to choose between a man and a woman, for instance, up to under 18. Why not? So Pope mentioned Elisabeth Loisel. Indeed, yes. I had this coach when I was in the French team, and it was very painful to say goodbye when she left. And we had no choice between a man and a woman then. And we want to have sufficient people to choose. And then now in 2013, we had then changed Bruno Bini. And Bruno Bini had Corinne Biacre, who was the first lady in France to have the pro license. So we suddenly could choose to have Corinne Biacre, who had been the assistant, and have her move up, or to have a man. So the executive committee said they wanted to change entirely the staff, so Corinne Diacre was out. But it is a matter of having the choice, and not just plenty of men and only one woman. And this is along the lines of Lydia and the leaders. How can you propose to a woman to become national coach if you don't have the substrate where people can move up? So one day there is indeed a true choice. And now we have moved from 600 to 1,200 coaches in France. And in this year too, we have changed the staff for the youth teams, and now we have one woman as a head coach. And this is the first time in France this has ever happened. Under 19 and downwards, it's the first time we have a lady on top of every group. And with Corinne Diacre, she is the first lady coaching a professional males club. Now, the message I have is to say, yes, we need women on the top, but let's have to start very low to have sufficient people to move them up to coaches and referees.
So the talent pool is there. It's a case of educating those coaches, and therefore, as things stand, if that continues in a few years' time, you will have the talent pool that's sufficiently experienced to be able to be selected for the top clubs. Is that happening throughout football? As things stand in a few years' time, are we expecting there to be that talent pool whereby clubs can pick experienced female coaches because they've got experience in their club game, that they then can be selected for national positions? Or does a lot more work need to be done now?
You don't see that. I mean, I think the French Federation do need some credit actually for the way in which they've looked at women's football, both in terms of women in leadership positions in the structure and, as we just heard, the coaching structure. And I don't see, personally, I mean, I'm not a coaching expert, but I don't see that around in a lot of places. I think one of the things that would be interesting actually is to, of course, the coaching debate is important because we are producing women players who then become ex-players and have an expertise. But also, I think there was discussion this morning about doctors, physios, media, journalists. We need an industry that is representative, because I think that industry then feeds off itself. And in the end, I think football on the performance side is becoming more scientific. So that will open it up more to outliers. You know, the former black players that get qualified but find the appointments blocked. Women who are qualified but men don't generally consider them as coaches. So the more focus we have on scientific performance management, I think the more opportunities it will open up. And then as football develops, more people are doing, particularly in Europe, more people are looking at academies and elite development centres. That's opening up roles, coaching roles for doctors and physios. So there's a real industry being created that will have to be filled in time on the basis of expertise, not networks and who you know. Because I think if we need to talk about that at the moment it is about who you know, not your expertise.
Anybody else from the floor? Yes, Maggie.
Thank you. Maggie Cruz Blanco, Women's Football Development Manager from FIFA. I'd just like to highlight something from a very special experience I had this week on Monday in Colombia. In terms of coaching, I think if we move out of Europe, there is a lack of awareness of what women can actually do, especially former players in football. When I was in Colombia on Monday, after the whole event of the Leave Your Goal Tour Stop finish, the whole women's national team said, "Can we have a moment with you?" All of them. And they all asked, how can we stay involved? They were so eager to continue involved in football. And I'm talking about women, very well prepared, very intelligent women. Some of them were finishing their career in marketing, in communication, speaking 3 languages fluently. Plus, some of them were already coaching in some small projects. And they all asked, how can we continue involved? They lack of awareness of their opportunities in football. Some of them were asking, actually, what is a B license? What is a C license? What is an A license? What is a pro license? I think we have to really get this information out there for women that want to continue their careers in football. This is very important. And then when they see there is information, there are opportunities, because the problem is once they pursue these careers, there has to be opportunities. And I agree with Hope. There are many qualified ones, but where are the opportunities? So they say, okay, this is not I don't take my career in football, I go out of there. So awareness, opportunities, and the reality is that if they have it, they would stay. And I was so touched when I saw all these women from Colombia, actually, their whole national team. We want to continue involved. We must not lose them. We must keep them in football, and I think they will become really great leaders, especially coaches. Thank you.
Okay, so more about creating the environment. This actually links the 2 sessions together, doesn't it? What you were saying about this morning, what Rebecca Smith was saying this morning, former New Zealand captain, now working with FIFA, about retaining ex-players in the game. Anybody else? We're coming towards the end of our Q&A session. Anybody else got any points that they're really keen to make? Anybody else on the floor? One, yes?
Yep. It's not to do with the coaches, because
That's
I think
fine.
I missed that. My name's Aisha Hansen, the president of the Solent Football Association. At the start, Lydia spoke about her experience getting to the top and the fact that she's got her own club and how she ascended to the throne, if you like. And the lady over there was saying something about, yes, you do feel the need to work a little bit harder because you're a woman and you're very conscious of that. Now, just a little bit of my own experience. It's a bit of a journey, actually, like Hope, my coming into football. But I own a Premier League club. It's 12 years old, and I didn't buy a club. I didn't buy First Division. I didn't buy a Premier side. I nurtured these boys from 9 years old to between 9 and ages 11. These were mainly orphan kids from after the Civil War. And my approaching them, I saw them playing football on the streets, actually close to my house. And the first thing for me was, why are these boys out till 9, 10 o'clock at night? They obviously have no homes, no parental guidance. So we started with the education. Now I'm just going to cut a long story short and tell you where I'm coming to in terms of how I see us women in these positions. I lured these boys back into going to school through the football. I promised I would give them balls and boots if they would go to school and stay in school. So we struck that balance. Now, from there, we progressed to them doing their little junior leagues, and they were winning. And it was their choice, actually, to call it FC Johansson. I said, you cannot say FC Johansson, but they insisted it has to be Johansson. We progressed from there till 2008, where I dared to take these young kids, with their parents' consent, of course, to Sweden, to an international competition. Prior to that, these are kids who had never used a flush toilet. They didn't know how to use cutlery, nothing like that. I had to take them into the academy, put them in the boarding quarters, teach them how to use fork and knives, teach them 3 meals a day, teach them how to use flush toilets, to wash your hands, everything. Because fact of the matter is, when you come to Europe, they will stare at you for all sorts of reasons. You're Africans, child soldiers, all sorts of weird and wonderful stories. Now, my take is, for us women, what makes us so different and what makes us successful, I think, is the fact that we take on a maternal role. Well, at least I speak for me. When I lead my boys, and I'm saying that after Sweden, we went to Real Madrid, we went to Las Vegas, I took these boys around the world. They came back as heroes, as young role models, young sports ambassadors for other kids at that age. FC Johansson, these are the boys that are globetrotting all over the world and actually telling the world we're not all about war and what have you, we've got talent. This was what led to Cruzeiros, clubs, countries coming to Sierra Leone at that time to play international youth football. It was because I have that maternal approach whereby if you step out of line, yes, you're going to get knocked by me, but at the same time, you are my child. You know, you look at me as your mother, and that is how I was able to groom them. Now, 10 years on, FC Johansson became my walking billboard. That was my campaign tool. I didn't have to go and stand and start giving manifestos and telling how I'm going to change the world of football in Sierra Leone. FC Johansson was living proof that it can be done. You can take kids from nowhere and make them into something, into somebody's. It gives them an identity. All right, and for me, the fact that I'm a woman, I'm never daunted by. I don't even look at that I'm a woman, so I've got to try so much harder. And maybe if I did have that thing behind my back, maybe I would never have gotten into football, especially in Africa, whereby you're stopped in your tracks even before you begin, because you're a woman. I never looked at it that way, and like I said, because I got to this point with FC Johansson as a woman, nurturing these boys, bringing them to a status, a lot of people started to look that maybe there's a different way to grooming football and to bringing it to status. It's a maternal approach that I have had, and that's made us a success story. And I believe with Lydia as well, she's got the stick and the carrot approach like I have. You step out of line, you walked, but there is that maternal approach as well to that. That's the point I wanted to make earlier.
There's a woman in football leadership for you. Thank you very much, Aisha. We're going to have to close the panel discussion there. Thank you very much to everybody, both around the world, online, on Twitter, who hopefully got the hashtag right. Thank you for joining us. Just want to finally finish just with a brief soundbite from each of you, if I may, about your closing thoughts on the women in leadership debate.
For me, I just would like to close by again encouraging everybody to get out there and talk about what you do, and encouraging women to be able to do whatever they want. You know, as I said, I would have never known this job existed when I was in school. And I had a passion for sport, just what we talked about before. So again, going out there and telling people you can do anything, women will be able to get into sport and be able to be successful.
I guess I would say think about leadership at every level. So we need leaders throughout the game, and it's not just about people sitting around a board table. It's about leadership, empowering others. So encourage that where you see it, and encourage and support women who are already in those leadership positions.
For me, I think that every person in this room is a leader. They've made the effort to identify this session, to come here. They made the journey, often paid for themselves. So go back and be leaders, I think. I share your views in terms that leadership comes in many different forms. I think at the same time, it's a sad reality that we still have many challenges to overcome. Sexism is rife in society, and in an industry like football, it's a daily hurdle for many women. So there will be challenges. Think creatively, as I think the McKinsey are doing. Take all the tools that are out there, and I think this can be beaten. Sexism can be beaten. We can reach gender parity in terms of leadership roles.
Talent is not a matter of sexes. So if we want to be successful, it absolutely is clear to me that we have to promote women in leadership positions. And why not starting by doing it myself? So walk your talk. In every committee that I sit, I have the chance to promote women, and I did so in the past, and I will so in the future.
Go, Carolina. Come on. At least get you in football somehow. This philanthropy, if you want to fund my football club.
No, honestly, in all the boards I've been promoting women onto. Nestle has started with one, as I started. Now we are 4, and so forth. So we have to do it ourselves.
You don't fancy being a football chief executive?
Well, I probably need to. I don't know. I'm not so knowledgeable about football.
That's okay, we'll have a word afterwards.
I need some coaching then.
Don't need to know the offside law, it's fine. Lydia.
Well, it is an advice for women in football. I mean, we have spoken about mentoring, and it is very difficult sometimes that a man would approach a woman in football to propose that. So the counsel I would like to give to the women is you find that man in the association, president of the league or of a club, somebody influential, go to him, ask for advice, and I think experience can be shared. And I think the man can then help the woman to understand the organization of the association, for instance. I think that is important. Just don't wait for the man to come towards you. Go towards the men. Go towards him to ask him for advice.
Nice about it. That's Petra. Sorry, Petra. You tell me off every time.
Exactly.
Sorry.
I think I would just want to leave a personal message to the men and the women in the room. So for the women, actually, I think you made a very good point. You know, if you don't have the aspiration, if you don't think big enough, who should be thinking bigger for you? There is no way around. You have to actually sort of try and reach the sky. So step up and also be a role model and a sponsor and a promoter for the young generation. For the men in the room, it's not possible without the men. So become sponsors, become allies, don't ignore the issue, and collectively let's all work together for better leadership of women, for better leadership of all of us, for better performance, be it FIFA, be it sports club, be it business.
think big, be a sponsor, promote yourself and promote other women. Fantastic message. Thank you for now. We haven't finished yet. The FIFA president, Sepp Blatter, is waiting to re-enter the arena, which I think he will do after we've watched a short video. Thank you again, once again, to all the panelists for now. That was fantastic. And now to the final part of the inaugural Women's Football and Women's Leadership Conference. We welcome back to the stage the FIFA President, Sepp Blatter, who has some very important and exciting news about the legacy of this conference. Mr. Blatter.
First of all, I would like to tell you that I followed part of this conference on my screen at the FIFA office, but I couldn't do the whole day with you. But I know it was well done. So we come to an end of this conference, which is it's a great conference. It was the first FIFA Women's Football and Leadership Conference. Football and leadership. So at the end of this conference, there shall be some official closing. And an official closing shall mean that we are convinced and that we are committed. And that's why I would like to special thank to the keynote speakers, to the panelists. Very interesting afternoon panel discussion, also in the morning, but this afternoon a little bit more heavy. To develop women's football and the way that you have done your homework here. As we draw at the end of this first Women's Football Leadership Conference to a close, it's my pleasure to sign the Brighton Plus Helsinki Declaration on Women in Sports on behalf of FIFA, the Fédération Internationale de Football Association, and the global football community. I'm very pleased, therefore, to welcome Ms. Ros Maforisa, the co-chair of the International Working Group on Women and Sport, the group behind the Brighton Plus Helsinki Declaration. Welcome to you. Just one minute, just give her the welcome. In this connection, I just want to say that we in FIFA, we have carefully followed the work of the International Working Group, where you are the co-chair. We are proud to sign this document as part of our own efforts to drive positive change in society. A concerted push for development and empowerment across the world is laying strong foundations for the future of women's football and for women in football. And we know there is more to do. This will bring huge benefits to the future health and sustainability of our sport. FIFA and myself, we will always remain committed to the development of women's football and to strengthen the role of women in sports and society, while taking the necessary steps to embrace all the principles laid down in this declaration that we are going to sign. Now it's we are going to sign it. Thank you. Can I ask FIFA testimonies to take the vote? You.
Okay, and just before the declaration is signed, we're going to hear some closing remarks from Ruth Maforisa, who's the co-chairperson of the International Working Group.
Thank you, Director of Ceremonies. When I was still young, we used to be asked the question, which one is heavier, a 50 kg of salt or a 50 kg of feathers? And I want to believe, related to football, some of the questions that are being asked are, who plays better, men or women? Are men more talented than women? Are men likely to succeed more than women? But I want to believe that from today's conference, there are a lot of take-homes from the various speakers. And what I can sum up from what has been said this afternoon is, even this morning, believe in yourself, love what you are doing, stay focused, go for it. It takes men and women to make it happen. Stand to be counted. Leadership in everything thrives where the environment is cultivated. We need mentors. Director of Ceremony, it is my pleasure to be here with you this afternoon, and I'm grateful for this opportunity to address this August gathering. We are honored as the International Working Group on Women in Sport to be part of this important conference. I would like to congratulate FIFA for having organized this first conference on women's football and leadership. This year's commemoration of the International Women's Day will highlight the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. It is a time to uphold women's achievements, recognize challenges, and focus greater attention on women's rights and gender equality. Allow me to congratulate Ms. Lydia Nsekera, as the first woman to be elected as a full member of the FIFA Executive Committee. This year, therefore, heralds a new era for rethinking sport and gender equality. In the words of FIFA President, when addressing the FIFA Congress, he said, "And we at FIFA have a duty to society that goes beyond the game. FIFA must stand firmly on the side of positive change to do what we can to make the world a better place for all. We have that power. Football has that power, a duty to serve and a duty to do what is right." Close quote. This quotation has a profound message, and I leave it to you to derive whatever meaning you would want to put to the message. Football as a sport which is universally played transcends social, cultural, and religious divides. Football, therefore, has the potential to play a meaningful role in advancing the cause for women in sport. 29 million women and girls play football around the world, and these figures speak to the need to meaningfully ensure women are engaged in decision-making structures. I therefore wish to commend FIFA leadership in recognizing the need to enhance women's participation in decision-making. According to the Director General of UNESCO, Irina Bokova, when we unleash the power of women, we secure the future for all. Sport gives women fabulous opportunities to engage in the public sphere, to assert themselves both in the field and in the managerial positions, to develop new skills. For that reason, empowering women is not just the right thing to do, it is also the smart thing to do. Women's football has over the years grown in leaps and bounds since the first FIFA Women's Cup in China in 1991, with a total of 122 member associations having entered the qualifying competition for the FIFA Women's World Cup in 2011 in Germany, with television coverage in 181 countries and the 32 games drawing 407.8 million viewers around the world. There is no doubt on the future of women's football. Top of IWG's agenda is to advocate for women's participation in leadership position in sport. To this date, women continue to be underrepresented in leadership positions in sport. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to take this opportunity to acknowledge FIFA's role in championing gender equality. Over the years, we have seen great growth in women's football and many times encouragement of women and girls through various physical literacy programs done through football. The quality and organization of local, regional competitions has been transformed too, and women today take part in areas such as media administration, coaching, refereeing, and medicine. But this is not enough, given the percentage of women taking part in leadership and administration of football in general. It is quite evident that FIFA is committed to championing change in the empowerment of women. By endorsing the Brighton plus Helsinki Declaration, FIFA fully commits, among other things, to ensuring that facilities are conducive for women to participate in sport, developing high-performing female football stars, providing leadership opportunities for women, supporting training and development for women and girls in sport, and allocating resources towards developing women in sport. May I also take this opportunity to invite organizations here represented to be part of the Women in Sport movement, not just by endorsing and signing the Brighton-Helsinki Declaration, but also implementing the principles and ideals of the IWG articulated in the Declaration. The Declaration urges the international sporting community to take immediate and concrete action in order to accelerate positive change in the areas of sport policy, leadership, coaching, participation, health, and well-being and safety. The Brighton plus Helsinki 2014 Declaration serves as the guiding force of the IWG network. The main aim of the network is to accelerate the process of change that could redress the imbalances women face in their participation, involvement in sport. Director of Ceremonies, in closing, may I once more commend FIFA for hosting a successful conference and thank all the speakers and participants for their selfless contribution in the development of sport and in particular development of women. We cannot leave empowerment of women to chance. And as such, at IWG, we have come up with the slogan for the 2014-18 quadrennial as Determine the Future and Be Part of the Change. I thank you for your indulgence. Thank you very much. And have a safe journey.
So, now I'm the master of ceremony. Thank you for accepting me. We are going now to sign this agreement to endorse the Brighton plus Helsinki 2014 Declaration on Women and Sport. And this document records the formal endorsement of the Brighton plus Helsinki 2014 Declaration on Women and Sport by Fédération Internationale de Football Association in Zurich, Switzerland on the 6th of March 2015. In recognition of the important role that sport and physical activity play in the lives of girls and women, we support the aim of the Brighton plus Helsinki 2014 Declaration on Women and Sport to develop a sporting culture that enables and values the full involvement of females in every aspect of sport. And I'll be happy to sign on behalf of FIFA, la Fédération Internationale de Football Association, and to be witnessed by the two members of the FIFA Executive Committee, Mrs. Nsekera and Mrs. Moyadot. And on your side, we first sign on your side. You can just say who is signing on your side. Just speak, it's okay.
Thank you. And I'll be signing on behalf of the International Working Group on Women in Sport as the co-chairperson for the 2014-18 quadrennial. And I wish to congratulate FIFA for the giant step that it has taken and taking the lead in the international arena to ensure that women are recognized as important participants in the world of sport. Thank you very much.
So that brings to a close the inaugural Women's Football and Women in Leadership Conference. I think we've learned quite a lot from today. A lot has come out of it. Some of those key points have been that football needs more quotas in some instances in order to kickstart greater representation for women. We've learned that more needs to be done to keep women involved in football after playing, to create more positions for female coaches in particular. Clubs and national associations need to do more, and women in leadership improve performances in corporate cultures. That's something that's come out of today. And also, the hope is that this will become an annual event to drive the debate and ultimately to influence policy. And thank you very much for inviting me to host today's inaugural conference. It's been a great honour for me. Just hope that today will help to accelerate positive change in the game, both at grassroots level all the way up to senior women in leadership positions. Everybody in this room can make a difference. Thanks so much. See you soon.